What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. Now this one is going to be a very interesting one because all I can say is just go ahead and grab some popcorn, alright, because we are going to be talking about a top secret Spider-Man game that was cancelled way back in the day. We're talking 2010. It's called a Spider-Man PS4, not a PS4 game, sorry, a Spider-Man 4 game that was basically rediscovered. And the crazy thing about this is, before these dudes actually shared this stuff, I mean, it was something that just purely wasn't discovered or showcased, I guess you could say, to anyone else, especially now around the world, and absolutely no one was able to play this game until now. Again, thank you to these guys. Now, we will be going a whole lot more in depth into that in a second, but I want to ask you guys a question, and it's about a villain, okay, in this game, because they do reveal a bunch of these details again, which we'll talk about in a second. But I wanted to ask you guys a question, and that is, going on the basis, you know, that there is going to be another Spider-Man game, of course. If this was the last Spider-Man game, and you know, the last time you're going to play against a villain, okay, which villain do you feel needs to be in the next Spider-Man game? The main villain, okay, it's going to be the final Spider-Man game, the final villain you're going to go against, sorry. Who should it be and why? I want you guys to leave your thoughts on that in the comment section below. Now, thank you to Gaming Alexandria, a secret Spider-Man 4 game that, like I said, was cancelled back in 2010, has now been discovered. Now, these guys, who I will link below, got their hands on a Nintendo Wii development kit that still had a playable version of the game on its built-in hard drive. Now, the interesting thing about this Spider-Man 4 game is that I believe it was going to be a Nintendo Wii exclusive, right? But at the time, and when you actually take a look at the gameplay and so forth, I mean, right now I'm going to be showcasing, of course, Spider-Man 4 stuff, but I'll show you guys little snippets throughout the video. But if you actually take a look at the game, I mean, it just looks great, okay? Like, naturally you would think, oh, it's a Wii game, it's an exclusive game, I no longer care about it. Just scrap that whole idea, okay? No, this actually looks like it could have been something very, very good. Now, Games Radar actually said of the following. Now, their exact words were, "This version of Spider-Man 4 is an incomplete and unpolished version, but it still has enough to give you a good idea of how the game would work." Now, there are two prototype stages that show off a mostly linear level design where Spider-Man is able to leap, run and swing from certain marked objects in the environment to advance. Now, occasionally he has to stop and fight a bunch of identical goons wearing baseball caps and gas masks. Now, compared to the current gold standard of Spider-Man games, Spider-Man PS4, it looks real rough. But there was still a lot of work to do when the game was cancelled for reasons outside of the developer's control. Now, they then continued to basically, you know, on this paragraph say, elements of the game's menus and environment seem to confirm that the Vulture would have actually been the main villain of the story, though sadly it doesn't give us a look at any potential costume design for him. Now, they finalized that by saying that the Vulture would finally make his cinematic debut years later in, of course, Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, to see what Spider-Man 4 looks like in action, you can watch this YouTube playthrough from Hard4 Games. There will literally be a link in the description below, and these are the guys that, you know, got their hands on it, and like I said, you can now essentially go ahead and download the prototype for yourself. They have, like, well, you basically download a copy of the game's ROM and play it on an emulator for yourself. And then they have like a bunch of stuff on their recommendations and things that, you know, it needs, etc, etc. But to give you guys a better perspective, I mean, the video is about half an hour long. There are a bunch of stuff to showcase, but just sharing little snippets with you guys and screenshots, like diving down into New York. Like, sure, of course this game is definitely unfinished, you can tell that, right? But it would have been on the Wii U, or the Wii in general, sorry. So when you take things like that into consideration, you see the prototype as well when it comes down to the green screen. What's real interesting about this is the characters in general. You have to remember, it's a development kit, right? So essentially it's like if you were continuing building this game to some extent. So you see everything like Spider-Man in the green screen with no environment around him. Then you restart the level and so forth. Of course, in this case though, you'd actually design what would have been around Spider-Man. So I guess all you're essentially seeing through this demo is purely how the character looks and so forth. Now, for a Wii game, okay, for a Wii exclusive, so it is more or less confirmed, this, I have to say, does look very, very good, and it looks super, super cool as a whole. For a game in its time, because I've always said to myself, and I know loads of you guys agree, that sometimes it's not about the graphics. I mean, of course, if you look at Spider-Man PS4, sure, the graphics were great and it definitely made the game popular. Well, it gets its popularity to where it is today, of course. But that being said, if the gameplay aspect of that game was just absolute trash, you would have never ever played the game any further, no matter how realistic the game looked. I mean, you probably would have tried it once, but if the game was boring as hell and you were restricted to so many different things and the gameplay was just so repetitive, you wouldn't really be bothered to do anything else. Now, what I'm trying to say is with this game, again going back to 2010, again having, the whole similarity when it comes down to villains and you're fighting the same dudes that literally look identical to each other, that would be boring. But in terms of the other gameplay aspects to this game, it looked like it could have been something that was very, very fun. And the main thing to take into consideration is it looks like the main suit was also the Raimi suit, which is a very, very popular request to every single Spider-Man game out there. And look how big it done with Spider-Man PS4. Now, I want you guys to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Again, taking a look at the game, it's a fully unfinished game, so there's absolutely no way you can judge the game based on, how it looks, literally. So everything that you see, you need to basically take into consideration that, well, hey, does this animation look good, and is it smooth and so forth, because there's a scene in this where he's running across a bridge and jumping and flipping, and it does work well. It's not like the game is super bugged out. Now, for the reason this game got cancelled, I don't actually know. It's safe to say though, of course, since then Spider-Man PS4 just completely replaced that, but it gets me thinking when it comes down to the next Spider-Man game, which we now know is more or less confirmed to be on the PlayStation 5. I was going to say Spider-Man 5, I don't know why, but it's more or less that the next game will definitely be a PlayStation 5 exclusive. And to actually add on to that information, just to kind of round things up, which I'll go a little bit more in depth in the next video, more than likely. Of course, we have the Game Awards next week, Friday the 13th. On top of that, they did say that 10 new games will be announced. There's a lot of superhero competition definitely out there now, and there has also been rumors that by the time the PlayStation 5 has its official announcement, you have to remember, right, we're more or less, well, we are in December. This is the final month of this year, right? So we know that a PlayStation 5 is coming in 2020, so when they go ahead and announce this console, which they haven't yet, you haven't even seen actual screenshots from the people themselves, a lot of people are saying that they're going to be premiering the console with a Spider-Man 5 game, a Spider-Man PS5 version, I guess you could say, to essentially do the promo of the console. Now, of course, that would be absolutely massive. It definitely would, depending on what they do change in that game. Again, taking a look at old games and so forth, and just really adding what you couldn't add before is basically the key. If that rumor is true, though, I think it could be very, very big. But I want you guys to get in the comment section below, as always, and leave your thoughts on that in the comment section below. Now, of course, to answer the question that I asked you guys in the beginning of the video on who the main villain in the next Spider-Man game should be, I really, at this stage, I have to be honest with you, I think if the next Spider-Man game was to be, a final Spider-Man game, literally having, essentially one Marvel world and just a bunch of Marvel superheroes in one, and essentially going head to head with different characters and just recreating, very big movie scenes to kind of finish off a game with villains would be very, very good. So I couldn't really say that there's one villain that I really would want to see. It is a very, very hard decision, but if you know who it is, then let me know below. I will see you in the next video. Till then, as always, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe for more awesome content, and until the next one, adios amigos.